how do I put myself outside of just saying, because that's the moderate response. The moderate response is to see something and say that's wrong and then walk away. Maybe to just, the minimum is to just say, this is wrong. Okay. Sure. But he's saying the Christian response is to follow actually the moral law, the law of God, and to do something. Mm-hmm. So when we, just because something's on the books doesn't mean I have to agree with it. Actually, I should challenge it through my understanding of God's laws. And that should be the guide for how I make my decisions and what I do within those, in that context.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Trinity Talks. My name is Kyla.
My name is Britt.
And we are here to talk about letters, but also very one sort of specific letter. So the Bible is full of all kinds of different letters that are written by people to the churches. And that's some of what we're studying in our sermon series on Sunday mornings. But I want us to fast forward quite a bit, a couple thousand years, to 1963, when Martin Luther King Jr. writes a letter from a Birmingham jail. And that letter is also, I think, a letter to the churches. Yeah. It's a letter to at least clergy, to church leaders. Yeah. And so I think it actually still has a lot of really helpful things for us to say to us today. So I know maybe not my first experience of this letter, but my most meaningful sort of experience with this letter was actually in Birmingham. So I was there for a conference. And at this university campus that I was on, in their library, they had a whole display about the letter from Birmingham Jail. Oh, wow. Yeah. And I just stood in this library and read this letter. And as I was reading it, I was like, was this written 60 years ago? Because this feels very true right now. So, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts, how you sort of approached it.
Yeah, no, reading it back felt like Martin Luther King Jr. is alive today and wrote it to us now. It felt very, it felt modern in so many ways. And then just to think that he was writing it in a jail at that time, at the end, I think he kind of it's almost like sarcasm. When he says, I'm sorry this is so long, but I'm in jail.
Got nothing better to do.
Yeah, there's so much humanity wrapped up in it. It took me for a spin, but it felt so modern that it almost didn't feel like I was reading something back from the 1960s, which is fascinating for me.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. So for folks who don't know, so it was written in 1963 in a Birmingham jail. That's why it's called the letter from the Birmingham jail. And at that time, actually in the letter, King describes Birmingham as one of the most segregated cities in America. And he's been arrested for being part of a public demonstration there to sort of oppose segregation. And he's writing actually predominantly to 8 white clergy who have sort of written this open letter that was then published in a newspaper, sort of criticizing this civil rights movement and saying, this is not the right time. You're not really going about this the right way. And there's a lot of fear of, is this breaking down our Christian witness by, creating these sort of tensions between the white church and the black church. And that's sort of the context that he's addressing. But yeah, as you were reading the letter, were there any particular parts that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the part that stood out to me the most was at the reason for the letter was because, as you said, the method and the timing of their action was wrong. And I feel like King really gets at when is the right time, what is the right method to go about creating change or being a Christian witness. And I was constantly challenged by that. It took me back to thinking of the things that are happening in our world today. Yeah. And in the many ways that it is so much, it actually almost reminded me of a letter to the Church of Laodicea with I would rather you be hot or cold.
Yeah.
And it felt like he was speaking to me and saying, like, choose a side. In fact, maybe there's not just one or the other, but there is, I think he describes it as like this perfect way. And that really, that really sat with me. What are Christians called to do? How are we called to witness, and when are we called to witness? And how do we challenge the norms in our society?
Totally.
To actually live into our call.
So like as you were talking, like that was also one of the parts that really like stood out to me was that he talks about like that's the part I was looking for. He says, I've reached the almost regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not in the white citizens counselor or in the KKK, but in the white moderate who is devoted to order more than justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will.
Yeah.
Right? Like that just that whole section there was like, really jumped out to me as this like, so like, who am I? Where do I fit in this? Because like, it's, you can deal with passion on either side. Like you can deal with, okay, if somebody's really passionate for a cause, you can like work with that energy. If someone is really passionate against a cause, like obviously that's not like ideal, but like at least there's like an energy there.
So I know where you stand.
I know where you stand. And I know not to like try and trust you. Right. But like for someone who's just like, in the middle, then it's like, there's no energy there to work with. There's no sense of it's unpredictable, I guess.
And then the other thing, like so he gets at the clergy that wrote this letter that he's responding to, and there was a point where he does commend them for the things that they did do.
Yep.
But it's almost as though they weren't willing to go the full way.
Yeah.
And in that maybe almost reminds me of like, if I'm going to stretch it a little bit, the rich young ruler who was willing to do some things, but that I keep coming back to that perfect way. Yeah. That was the part that kept the rich young ruler didn't want to go the full mile that Jesus was calling him into. And I could foresee, I see that in the way that those men, I'm assuming they're all men, 60s. But it was in that same way, like I feel like they were willing to do some things. So maybe in their local congregation, I think two of them had ended the practice of segregation within their local congregation.
Right.
But even that, King says, is not enough. Because what is the sense? Yes, you're able to have worship within your congregation, but you still have this whole other realm where people are treated as less than human beings. And so for King, it's like, it's not enough to do the bare minimum. And I think that's that piece about lukewarmness. It's like, I'll just do a little bit.
Right.
I don't want to ruffle the feathers as too much. But yeah, they weren't willing to do the hard thing, the thing that costs you something. And that is, I sit in my seat and I'm like, no. I could see how that is something that I today could have issues with. And he doesn't just talk about like the white moderates, right? Like he talks about in explaining the plight and the struggle of African Americans. He does talk about the different positions or groups that they would have fallen into in the 60s. So you have the ones who were so used to oppression that they just saw it as normal and didn't even fight against it. And then you had the second group who he described as like academics and maybe business people who had because they had that social access and they probably had some sort of financial gain in the social structure of segregation, they were willing to like, just let it be because there's something in it for me. I think a lot of us as for many of us who are middle class, that is a thing that tends to happen. I could see myself in that. And then you have what he described as Black nationalists, folks that they, at the end of the day, they were like, you know what? I don't believe that these white men are going to change their minds. I don't believe that the system's going to change. Yeah. So there's going to be devils and we're just going to have to do what we got to do. Yeah. And I could see all of, like, I see us in those camps. And I don't think he's calling for us to be any three of those. So in the same way, he's not calling for us to be extreme Klansmen or moderates. I think King was just saying, be a Christian.
Right.
Like, just be a Christian. But anyway, I'll stop with this.
No, that's so interesting because I think it is helpful to like draw some parallels to the way of Jesus in this, because like, obviously that is sort of what is calling him is Christ. And he's like very upfront about that. And just that sense that like Jesus is constantly disturbing the peace, right? And just, like showing up and doing the things that are not expected, hanging out with the people that are like on the margins and like doing that to the point of death. Yeah. Right. And so, there's a cost. Like if we're following Jesus and Jesus is the example, like there was so much cost to him. And so obviously there's cost to us. And then, so the question then becomes like, if I'm not experiencing a cost, like, am I faithfully following Jesus? Now that feels also like a slippery slope, because like, I don't want to say that the way that in order to be a faithful Christian, you like have to be suffering. Cause like, let's not all run out and chase suffering. But like, there is something about following the way of Jesus that just is gonna set you apart in some way and like alienate you from some people, I think. Yeah.
There's so much tension in all of it. A word he used often. As well.
And I mean, that word tension, like I in my gut, I like hear tension and I like want to like hide away from it because it feels like this, like, I don't know, I'm a conflict avoiding kind of person most of the time. And so like tension just doesn't feel good. But like the point that Martin Luther makes is that like that tension is actually, it can be positive. Like he talks about it being like the gadflies that like, like bite an animal and like get them doing a thing. Right. And like, that's what tension should be. It's not that it's like tension for tension's sake. It's not for the sake of like stirring up stuff. It's for the sake of moving something forward. And like drawing attention to things that otherwise we might ignore, especially if you're sitting in a seat of privilege, especially, or if you're like benefiting from the status quo or just like not negatively impacted by the status quo. Right.
Yeah. So that leads me to think of his, like when he's talking about direct action, and I guess the question that was posed to him in the original letter was that not right way, not right time. Why not use negotiation?
Right.
And he says, well, they're not willing to negotiate. And he gets into something that I actually think in a lot of protest movements that I've witnessed, a tool that they use very often. Doesn't necessarily happen within our Christian context as much, but it's something that I've seen where you can't get a group to be in conversation with you in good faith. So you create that tension, those conditions for tension, so you can have that discourse in a meaningful way, one that gets people to really listen. Yeah. It's in the inconvenience, in the like there's so much examples that we've seen. In that inconvenience, I can get you to face the reality, right? And I thought it was like fascinating how he compared the tension that direct action creates for predominantly white folks in Alabama, or created for white folks in Alabama, to the tension that he describes for his children. And it awoken something into me. Like he said, he talked about his daughter and how his daughter has to deal with that tension.
Right.
When she looks at the amusement park advertisement and she's like, I want to go there. And he has to tell her, well, no, colored people are not allowed there. And then he talks about his son and he gives another example and he says, well, and now he talks about how like that tension creates something. It creates, he has to try and shift that energy that his daughter and his son have that could brew hate, which he explicitly says. It's like, it's a natural consequence. So it's like the idea of everyone will experience tension. Yeah. Tension is something that happens in relationship. It's when we avoid it. And I guess if we're going to actually try and maintain human relationship, then the right thing to do is to just do the direct action and make it happen.
Right.
Which is uncomfortable, but I think it does push us to a place where we can be in relationship with each other, because I think what we're doing is we're trying to avoid it.
Right. Yeah. And I wonder if like part of what direct action does is it creates the tension like earlier.
Yeah, it could
then
be.
like because if in the example of these kids, if they are, experiencing this tension and then they grow up and grow into a sense of greater tension and alienation and maybe even like hate or anger towards others, then like that's going to be something that then like blows up and gets bigger over time. Whereas direct action says, let's not move towards that inevitable. Let's like throw the tension in your face right now so that we can deal with it before we get to hating each other, or before we all get there anyway.
Yeah, before we all get there, because the reality is that many people had already gotten there.
Totally.
And there's a whole other ecosystem in the 60s filled with Black national movements, and a lot of that created a lot of violence. And what King is saying, he's like, I understand how that violence is created, and it's not created in a vacuum. It's created because of those early narratives, those early experiences of children. And he uses his kids as a perfect example, I think. And yeah, like I think we have to deal with tension. If we're going to be in relationship with each other, we have to let tension exist. So if we are in conflict with each other, then we need to be able to tackle that right on. And if we see that there are inklings of maybe someone trying to avoid that tension, then maybe the good thing to do is to just say, you know what, I'm going to take up a little bit of space so that we can have this conversation in a way that is like, it doesn't have to be like his example is direct. His example in that particular situation, the government was not listening. The community was not listening. And they didn't have to listen because they were creating more and more roadblocks for them to be able to vote or to be able to access services. And that's what he does is an extreme. And he sees it as something like, yes, this is inconvenience. This is extreme. Yeah. But I think in our one-to-one relationships, and I think he rightfully points at Martin Buber and uses that I and thou, I, it relationship dynamic to say, if we are humans, if you believe that I'm a human and you're a human, if you believe that you're a child of God, I'm a child of God, then we need to be in conversation with each other, and you need to be able to hear and understand my plight. And that is tough. I think totally. It's uncomfortable. I hate doing it. Sure. But I know that if I'm going to be in relationship, in community with people, if I'm going to say I love you and I care for you, and that's also what he gets at too, then I need to be able to just let tension be, so it could escape in some way. Yeah. Because it's that, like, I think people use this analogy when they're talking about anger, like, you like bottle it up inside for so long, and then at some point it's going to explode. Right. And that is true
on lots of different levels, right? And yeah, it is that tension that builds up that we need to find healthy ways of releasing. And sometimes I think when people think about healthy ways of releasing anger, they think about like, okay, so don't direct it towards people at all. And like, maybe it means I talk to you about my anger without exploding at you.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe it means like, because especially if the conditions are such that like the thing that I'm angry about is just going to continually be true. Like it's one thing if somebody does something that like frustrates me and then it's over. But like if that is how society is structured to constantly frustrate me, then like that's a bigger problem.
Yeah. Huh. So I guess the other part that I'm curious about was like his conversation on laws.
Yeah.
And that was also when I was tussling as I was reading it.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? And I think the example he gave was right. I think it's true for all time. And he uses Nazi Germany as an example.
Right.
And I thought that was, okay, perfect example for that. 'Cause that's one that our society tends to see as very white and black.
Right.
There's not much unless we're, I don't know, in the upside down, where that's going to be a challenge in that way.
Yeah. So sorry, just to then clarify there, like what he said was that, so we can never forget that everything that Hitler did in Germany was legal and everything that the freedom fighters did was illegal. Right. But that doesn't make it actually right.
Yeah.
There were laws that made it possible for Nazi Germany to exist, but that doesn't mean that was good.
Yeah. But then he puts himself, I think it's easy for us to talk about things as abstract or outside of ourselves. And I found the way that he put himself in the story. And he says, would I have done, if I was in Nazi Germany, what would have been my reaction to those laws? Would I have respected them? Or as a Christian, would I have seen them as unjust, and would I have done, I think he describes it as like the perfect way. I think he used that word. I think that's the word he used, but maybe I'm incorrect. But yeah, like I think for more and more of us, and I was challenged by this, how do I put myself outside of just saying, because that's the moderate response. The moderate response is to see something and say that's wrong and then walk away.
Yeah.
Maybe to just, the minimum is to just say this is wrong. Okay. Sure. But he's saying the Christian response is to follow actually the moral law, the law of God, and to do something. So when just because something's on the books doesn't mean I have to agree with it. Actually, I should challenge it through my understanding of God's laws, and that should be the guide for how I make my decisions and what I do within those in that context. But that's hard to insert ourselves. Like that was a self-exercise we did often. I don't know if it challenged you in that way, but
no, totally. It is like, it's really interesting to like think about some of these examples that are like so practical and so like life or death, because like I have heard lots of preachers talk about this idea that like God's law is the preeminent law. And so like human laws should, align with that. But if they don't, follow God's law. But usually what they're talking about are like things that seem less important to me. They're talking about like the way that you spend your time or your money. They're talking about, like whether we should vote this way or that way. And like these are important things. But like in this context, it's like, no, are you following God's law of love and life, or are you following this, in the example of Nazi Germany, this other law that like literally leads to death? And so I think sometimes we like overcomplicate God's law, because especially if we look at scripture in the Old Testament, God's law can seem really complicated, right? There's like 600 or so of these laws, and we're like, oh yeah, so we can't possibly follow all of them, so let's just throw them out. But like Jesus then summarizes God's law as love. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. this is the law and the prophets according to Jesus.
Yeah.
So like that, it's hard, but it's not complicated.
But it gets complicated when we have something to lose, right? And I do see how that can be challenging when the doing the right thing could mean that I could lose my job.
Right.
Or I could lose my friends or my family members. And that happened for some people. Some of the people that Martin Luther King describes in the letter as, I guess today we'd call them white allies.
Right.
In the story, he names them out, and if you look at their stories, they went through a lot. They were demonized and blacklisted, and those types of things happened to those people. So are we willing to let that happen to us? If let the pieces fall where they may. Like Martin Luther King Jr. was labeled, if I'm not wrong, he was labeled almost like a terrorist and was watched by the FBI. Like, are we willing to do the right thing at that cost?
Right.
There's so many things I think we weigh against when it comes time to do the right thing. It's like, well, is it what's like? We're thinking about things I think are reasonable to an extent. If we're thinking of, okay, well, I might lose my house. If I lose my job, I lose my house. I can't feed my kids.
Right.
And those are things that I think can be pretty typical for us to think of, or you could define it as reasonable. But then, am I really trusting God if I believe that God can really hold all? Can control my circumstance or be there for me in times of need, then do I really trust God?
Yeah.
And I do believe, because he was writing in a jail. That was not his first jail. That he really did he trusted God to hold him in the tension that existed in his wider society, that led to tension in his home, that led to tension within his community. Like he held on to God and believed God and trusted God.
Yeah.
And he speaks about those other individuals that did the same thing. He talks about Abraham, and he talks about his namesake, Martin Luther. And he talks about Paul, and he talks about these people that said, I'm going to trust God anyway, and I'm going to do the thing that God has called me to do. Yeah. Which is to seek justice, to love mercy. I talked about Amos. Like, he named all these great giants that did lose something when they did the thing that God called them to do, when they chose God's law over the law of the land. That is, so people have done it. He's done it. And he's calling us. He's calling those ministers he was writing to, and I believe he's calling us to follow God. To listen to God, to not be lukewarm.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, I feel like there's one sense in which none of this makes sense without faith. Right? Like, and that's not to say that people who aren't Christians or people who aren't people of faith, like, can't join in these movements. They definitely can. But there's something about being a person of faith and saying, I trust God, I'm following the way of Jesus, that, like, I don't know, it adds some weight to it. It adds some, like, grounding to it, I think, right? Because it's not like, oh, I'm just doing this because I personally believe in this set of ethics, or I personally believe in these things that have led me to want to do this. It's like, no, I believe in the God of the universe. I believe in the sovereign Lord who is over all of this and in all of this. And so, on the one sense, that means, like, it's not up to me, right? Like, I don't have to control the outcome of this movement or this action. And if this action ends up in the way that is not ideal for me, like, I have something to fall back on, which is God. And that doesn't always mean physical comfort and safety, right? Like, he talks about the early Christians who were, like, thrown to the lions for disobeying Caesar's law and these things, right? Like, it's not going to turn out comfy, cozy.
No.
But there's still something good about it.
Yeah, because great is your reward in heaven. I agree with you. Like there's that grounding. Because I look at a lot of our movements today, and I see so much despair. It doesn't feel like, and I'm generalizing, but it doesn't seem like folks are hopeful for something. And I think I ask myself the question of, okay, yes, we're tearing something down, but what are we building?
Yeah.
And I think Martin Luther King Jr. knew what he was building.
Yeah.
He knew what he was building was, he was ushering in the kingdom of God.
Right.
For all people.
Yeah.
At all times.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we need to hold into. Like he's in his letter. I don't think it's, and I shared the letter with someone recently, and I was saying, you know, like there's so much in our world is pushing us to be like, to pick a side, pick a lane, pick a cause, do this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. I hear you. But he's not calling any of those. He didn't call those people to pick a left or a right. He called them to pick Jesus, and pick Jesus fully.
Yep.
And that is, I think that's a harder thing to do. I think it's easier to pick those spots, and then in both spots, I think you choose anger or you choose numbness.
Yep.
But that's not the way of Jesus. There's something hopeful and grounding, as you said, that is in that keeps you. I don't know if you've seen like the footage from like some of the footage that they have like when they were marching. And I often look back at some of the footage where like you see the police brutality and you see their faces, how like solid they were. Like there's something horrific is happening to them.
Yeah.
They're just so resolute that they're going to just stand their ground and do the thing that they came to do. They never shout back. They never hit back. Like they just solid. And how are they capable of doing that?
Right.
Like I can only see that Jesus had to be with them in that moment to make them feel like they could do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it brings this letter into conversation with like the I have a dream speech in some sense, because it is the dream. Like there is that thing that we're working towards. And I think if it's only we're running away from something, we're afraid of something, you know, segregation is bad, obviously. Or in the modern day, you know, like climate change, whatever it is, like all of these things that we are trying to push back. It's like, okay, sure, push back. But like, what are you pushing towards?
Yeah.
And if you don't have something you're going towards, then like, I don't know, I think it's harder than to stand your ground.
Yeah. Especially when you see major setbacks.
Yeah.
And he saw many of those. But with the context of knowing, having that grounding, I think it gives you the space to, even in the midst of the setbacks, in the midst of further oppression, to be able to stay focused. And I see that. I feel like this letter like took me places because it's the encouragement I think we need to see today. And that's why I felt like it was like, because he write this just yesterday and like penned it for the New York Times or something. like who wrote this? Like in 1960s, it doesn't make any sense. But I think there's it's principle, right? Like throughout time, and that's why he's able to echo back or reflect back to scriptural time or to the 1940s and years gone by, because it's a principle. It's not because political positions sway and they move, and popular opinion sways and it moves. But yeah, if we're getting back to what he talks about in like the laws, like God's law stays forever. Yeah. And the principles that Jesus has set out for us, those remain. They're not time bound. Yeah. They are I'm looking for my theological word, but I don't have it. But they're transcultural.
Yeah.
And they push beyond what we currently know, and they're consistent. Yeah.
Because it's Jesus, and Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, but not in a boring way.
Yeah.
In a just like always relevant way. Which then makes me think about this other line that really stood out to me in the letter, where Martin Luther King was talking about, if the church doesn't address the issues of the day, and in his day that was segregation. We could insert lots of other things in our day, but if the church is not addressing the issue of the day, then we risk becoming what he called an irrelevant social club.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I was like, wow, so many of my peers would sit and say, the church is pretty irrelevant. And people just like go there and hang out, and then they go back and do their lives. But like, it hasn't changed anything. Yeah. So like when I read that, I was like, oh, so has the church has been waning towards irrelevancy for a while, and that's scary. But also I don't think it's universally true. Right? Like I think there are local churches, there are people following Jesus who are desperately trying to be relevant, and who I think are doing that well. But it's not always the norm, I guess.
Well, then this is what I would say for like, how do you do that well? And I think at the crux of the letter, I feel like he's calling people into relationship, into a deeper listening. And I think if the churches that do that well are churches that prioritize relationships, prioritize deep relationship, prioritize not just doing a program. Forget like our Sunday like production. Like that's not the focus. The focus is being in relationship with each other, to build a stronger kingdom. And I think that's where we get it wrong, because we push away these issues that people are dealing with in their day to day. Like, remember he talked about the experiences that his children were going through. Like that's not, if we were to ignore those things within our Christian community and we didn't create space to hear those stories, and to share in the carrying of those burdens, then like it become irrelevant because we're not tapped in. If I don't know what my brother, sister, or sibling is going through, how can I be in relationship with them? I think that's one thing that I think is just, it could be really beautiful from like the pen pal writing series. Is that it could push us into even deeper relationship, because we're forced, something about letter writing is you're forced to listen. You can't pause the letter and start talking. You just need to listen. You need to listen. And I think that is, if the church is going to become relevant, then we need to be able to listen. We need to put aside the program. And I all I do is program design. That's it. So I'm like, I know. We have a timeline. We need to get out the door. Like, I get it. But if we're not in conversation with each other, then what's going to happen is there's going to be a moment where we're faced with it head on. And that's going to be uncomfortable. And it's going to be disruptive. And he even says it could even be dangerous. And the church doesn't want to be in that mix. We want to be in the mix of creating further spaces for dialogue, so people can be heard, they can be valued. And I think that in its micro, micro is a small, whichever, micro.
Micro.
In its micro level like this, if we can start doing that within our local parishes and churches, then the ripple effects, that exercise, that ripple effect will just, it can carry in large ways. And that, I think, will, a church that's less, a part of the solution of a church that's less irrelevant.
I know, that's so interesting, because I just think, like, sometimes when churches think about, oh, we're losing our relevance, they think, so we need to like learn the hip language of the youth, or we need to like talk about Minecraft, or I don't know, whatever. I am irrelevant because I don't know what the kids are talking about these days.
They're still playing Minecraft. They're still
yeah.
playing
Okay, great. but we think like that's how we be relevant. But actually, what about the like deeper human need for just like community?
Yeah.
Right. If the church is not meeting that basic need, then we become irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because like, actually, I think one of the things that Jesus was all about was building community, being in relationship, spending time just like getting to know people and then like walking with them on the path towards life. Yeah. And so like, that's relevance.
Yeah. So then the question is, do I truly understand the plight of my brother? Because if I do, I think this is what he's getting at. If you do, then you would understand why I've taken these actions. So,
right.
I think what he's getting at, and he is Martin Luther King Jr. I feel like we're so rude saying he. But what he's getting at in that is, it's clear to me that while you're well-meaning, and I, like he said, he starts and he's like, I don't even like usually comment on like criticism, but I see you as brothers, and I think you're genuine. So I'm gonna entertain you. But I'm also gonna call you out and say that you truly don't understand what people like him, what the Negro is experiencing, because you haven't actually taken the time to listen or to see us fully. Because if they were seeing them fully, they would see, there's actually no space for them to actually have this conversation or to create change. And there's not enough people actually trying to push that so that change can happen. Like, do we really know? I don't think I can answer for myself. I can say that I don't truly know my figurative brother or sister as well as I should. If I know someone enough, I should know them enough to see their pain fully. It shouldn't come as a surprise when they make it known. And I don't think we exercise that anymore as a larger society, and that's echoed into our church, or now it's extended into the church.
Totally. So I feel like we've covered a wide range of things. There's a lot of stuff to sort of pull out of this letter. So I want us to sort of focus in on our last little bit here, but like, what's like one or two things that you're like taking away from this letter that you're like, this is like a point that I want to focus on? So I think one of the things for me is just recognizing that there is a lot of fear and anger and mostly fear and anger, but some hurt that exists in our society right now. And I want to, it's not that I like ignore that, but it's just like, it's so overwhelming that like, sometimes I feel like I just like am not keeping up. And so what I'm reading, what I'm pulling out of this is just that sense of like, how do I check in with the people who are experiencing some of that? Not that I need to be up on all of the news headlines or all of the policy decisions or whatever is happening in the world, but like, am I checking in with my queer siblings? Am I checking in with the people of color, the immigrants, the people that I know who are afraid, who are hurting right now? Because I think even if I can't fix it, I can take some space to hold that, I think.
I'm challenged.
There
was a sermon that I listened to this week where this pastor said he's overwhelmed in relation to all the things that's happened in this world as of recent. And I echo that. In many ways, I do feel overwhelmed by what we see. But I'm also encouraged in that, in knowing the end of the story,
Yeah.
that should give me, I think, greater desire to usher that in.
Yeah.
So in listening, in reading his letter, I feel like I'm being called into less complacency or neutrality, and one that chooses God every single moment.
Yeah.
Chooses the perfect way, chooses the way that God desires, to seek justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly. Like, those are the ways that I think, if I could, all three of those all together at the same time. Because I even in my own life, like when he was depicting like that, those groups, I felt like he was talking to me in many ways. And I'm like, okay, when you have power, you should do something with it.
Yeah.
And Martin Luther King Jr. showed us what he did with that power.
Yep.
With the influence that he had, and how he called people to see the power that they had within them. Even people that were extremely oppressed saw the power that they had, and they did something. And if they could do that, then I should do that. And I can do that because that's what God desires of us.
Yeah.
Knowing the whole story, but not feeling like, okay, well, it's going to happen. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's at somewhere in between where it's a little bit of an urgency, a little bit of a like, hey, there's work to do, but not, hey, there's so much work to do that it all falls on me.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to fall on me. Because in community, we are in relationship, and we should be able to do it together.
Yeah.
We're never doing it alone. Yeah. Great letter.
Yeah. Totally.
Timely letter.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Just again, like, I think I just keep coming back to this like 60-year-old letter that like it still speaks.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not going to call it scripture because that seems like a bit much, but like in the same way that scripture is this ancient thing that still speaks today, this is a letter that still speaks today, and not the word of God, but I think God is speaking through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like 1963, that's the year my dad was born.
Okay.
So it's not that, he's not that old.
No.
So, it's not that far. It's not that far, but it does put things in context.
Yeah,
as to like
totally.
where we've gone, where we're going, and what God has in store for us. So, yeah.
The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
Yeah. Not by itself.
Not by itself. No, by the hand of God.
Yes.
And the work of God's people.
Amen. Yes, I like that. Oh,
very cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Trinity Talks. Wherever you find yourself on any political spectrum, on any sense of fear or joy or whatever's happening in the world, I pray that God meets you there. And I pray that you are able to find your calling, to use the power, the gifts that God has given you to do God's work in the world. And we'll see you again next week.